once payroll started building, now all of a sudden it was like, hey, like, we need to generate X dollars in revenue every month.
Can I really make it out there? Is it safe to leave?
As a business owner and now a new mom, like, how did you navigate that period?
I wasn't bringing in more income at that point. I was just spending more.
What's up, guys? Well, I am very excited to have this conversation. I have my good friend Jessica Kennedy here, and I'm excited to have this conversation for multiple reasons. One, because I've known Jess for a long time. She's very close to me and my wife, but I've also seen her business from like the inception and how it's grown. And I remember, the time before it. So, Jess, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, 100%. Maybe we can start off by just, you telling us about your business, what you do specifically. Like, I feel like I have a good understanding,
Mhm.
but I also feel like I would butcher it. So I'd like love to hear like you just tell us what you do.
Absolutely. So, high level, I'm an empowerment coach, and I work primarily with women on career transition and also the transition into motherhood, which a lot of us call matrescence. And so the way this takes form is usually I have a signature one-on-one program where this is like meeting with clients weekly. If I am local, or if they're local to me, I can meet them in person. But a lot of this is like virtual appointments where we get really aligned on what are some changes that they're wanting to make in their lives. Like a lot of the women that I work with, they may identify with like being pulled in like so many directions, but feeling like something's not quite right. Like something in my life is amiss. I feel like I'm destined for something else. I really love getting down to like the bottom of that because I have a very personal journey with that too. And then I also do workshops and then keynote speaker events and things of that sort. Yeah.
I want to dive deeper into this, but let's start from before you started the business because you were a very successful professional person, CPA, worked for a massive firm, PricewaterhouseCooper, in the LA office, in the Amsterdam office, in the Seattle office. So let's talk about your journey at PwC and like how you got to where you got now.
Absolutely. So, and if I may, I might even start like even a little bit before that, like college. My parents were really supportive of me following, any career that I wanted, but I needed to have a minor or a second major in accounting. And then graduating soon after 2009, or the big economic downturn, graduated in 2010. I was, grateful to have this background in accounting because that was what was hiring at the time, and I landed a job like right after I graduated. And it's funny because like when I think about my business, there's like flash moments from my past that like the flashbacks, like key like times and dates where I can see where the seeds were being planted. The day before I started at PwC, I was at lunch with a few close friends who were starting at PwC the next day with me, people in my start class. And all of my friends were like so excited. They're like, I wonder what it's going to be like. We're finally going to make money. We just graduated. Like everyone was stoked. And I was such a stick in the mud. I was like, I don't know, guys. Like I'm feeling really sick, kind of. Like, I don't know if like this is the right thing for me. And they're like, get over it, Jess. You're like, you're fine. But as we were leaving this restaurant, I felt like my arms were like, something was weird. I took my cardigan off. I was like covered in hives.
Wow.
I was like really having this like intense like physical reaction to something that didn't quite like feel right. And you've given the background. I've been there. I ended up working there for 11 years. So the story with my career doesn't end there. I didn't choose something differently, but I knew that something wasn't quite right. I lived in LA for 6 or 7 years and worked for our office there. And at PwC, one of the rewards that you get when you make it to the first promotion, which is senior associate, it's this reward program where you get to go on a retreat at Terranea in Palos Verdes, if you guys know where that is. It's so beautiful. And it's like this 5-day retreat, and you're there with like other colleagues who also promoted, and you get assigned into these like little cohorts, and you get assigned a life coach. And that was where I first got exposure to like what a coach is. And we would do these small groups and a coach would lead it. And we were talking about things like, what is it like to, step into like a managerial role? What are some of the goals that you have? And again, I found myself in this like place where I was like in a circle with people who were all like at the same place as me, but I was feeling so different. People were scared about, leading and how are they going to maintain work-life balance. And again, I was like, I don't know, guys. I don't feel like I should be here. And it felt like it just felt so true to me. It felt good to get that off my chest. And later on, my coach from that retreat pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, Jess, have you ever considered a career in coaching?" And having just witnessed her all like the amazing work she was doing, facilitating these conversations, like I was watched her in such admiration. So for her to ask me that question, I just like broke down in tears. It was like, wow, like that this is so flattering. I feel so seen. Yes, like I would love to do something like what you're doing. I went as far as even to go to the first weekend intensive of coaching school after that, but for lack of a better term, like chickened out and didn't continue with the rest of the schooling. And I stayed at PwC for another 6 years after that.
Wow. So that was about halfway
About
into your
halfway.
PwC career.
About halfway, I had a very strong inclination of what I wanted to do. And still like fear kicked in. And then there were reasons to stay. You mentioned like I went to Amsterdam. Was lucky to do a secondment and have this international experience. But that like intuition and that voice was still there, even when I was jet setting and seeing all these countries. And it was like this, supposedly the time of my life. It was also like pretty painful, like knowing that I wanted to do something else. And I was masking that for many years.
Talk to me about the process of actually making the decision, like when you did. And because it sounds like you were already like processing it for years. And the reason I'm interested in it is because I've also gone through this process,
Yes.
right? Of having
Yes.
a stable job and stable career. And I think the difference between me and you is in the job that I was in, I actually enjoyed the work and I didn't feel like I wanted to do something else. I felt like I wanted to do what I was doing for myself, right? Like, so it wasn't a career transition. It was a transition from working for someone else to working for myself. Whereas you made a switch from not just a very stable job, a job where you were very successful in and constantly being promoted in, and a job where you were like working very hard. I mean, I know, like, we back in those days, like we did not see you guys, during what
It
are the
was
months?
January through April.
Yeah, January
Yeah.
through April, Chris
Hmm.
and Jess are gone.
Gone.
Like
Yep.
no ski trips, no
Yes.
anything. And
Yep.
so I remember my wife, who's a good friend of yours, like when she told me that you're making the jump, I was like, wow. One, I was proud of you because like I know the stress that goes into that decision and the fear, but also the excitement, of so talk to me about like how you mentally like got to that place and what you were experiencing.
Like for many people, the pandemic was really clarifying for me. So at that point, I was in Seattle and we had only recently moved there, and our community was very small. And it's unlike California or LA or Santa Barbara. The pandemic for Seattle, like it hit hard because it's very rainy. So there wasn't like opportunities to just like be outside all the time. So really what that meant for me was like my husband and I and our dog were like basically in our apartment. All of my family's in LA. So we just had work. Like that was basically like our primary focus. And like at that point, that intuition I had about coaching, that little voice that I kept hearing over the years, it felt more like it was shouting at me. You need to wake up and change your life because this is not it. This is not how you want to be living. It was painstaking. I was successful in my career, but I had to force myself to do that work. It was like every single day, it was like grit, like get in there and do the thing, even though I didn't want to do it. And I was like solving problems I didn't enjoy. I didn't really care for. They weren't that important to me. And so I was like, well, F it. What else do we have going on? Who knows how long this pandemic's going to last? I may as well go to coaching school with my, evenings and weekends. And I enrolled in a school and I got back. So that coach that was at that retreat got back in touch with her. I had loosely kept in touch with her over the years. And then I told her, I'm like, Elise, I'm doing it again. I'm diving back in. I'm going to coaching school. And she was a strong supporter and encourager. That was really helpful because besides like getting the guts to like just make a move, the other thing that was really hard for me was like breaking the news to my mom. Well, joke's on me because when I told her, she was like, I just want you to be happy. I'm like, what? In my head, I had built it up so much, but like slowly, I had told Chris, I told my mom, I like got good with myself. I'm like, I'm just gonna take like a risk on myself. I work with people every day who make these like large investments in these companies. They just believe, like put their money in believing in somebody else to make that money for them. I'm like, I'm just going to do that same thing, except I'm going to do it in me. I'm going to invest this money in me, and this time. And then after I graduated, hired my coach. That was pivotal, important, because it's one thing to go to the school. It's another to be like, okay, now I'm really leaving this nest and I don't know where my next paycheck is going to come from. I think I got one paying client before I left, and I was like, okay, there's proof. Someone will pay me for this. And then she and I came up with a plan, an exit plan. I made sure that I had like a cash reserve that I was comfortable with. And then I put in my notice and I was scared. And 3 weeks later, I got pregnant. And then I had another like really heated like internal battle with myself. All those fears like set in that were like keeping me there. They're like, see, what the hell did you do? You just left the place that would give you like this, like a guaranteed maternity leave and stability, and you're bringing a kid into this world. So I had to wrestle all those demons too. But yeah, I'm here. So it, clearly worked out.
I forgot that it aligned so close with your
Yes.
pregnancy. That must have been a situation where you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Especially now, like maternity leave, stability, and all of the rest of it, which adds this like added element of pressure and fear and stress into making that transition.
Completely. It was like I was really proud of myself and then immediately like almost like I made a mistake. That's why having a coach is like so instrumental for me, like just a sounding board, someone to like help me keep my dreams front and center when those fears set in. I don't think there's a coincidence that I got pregnant when I did. Chris and I were trying, not, it wasn't over a year at that point, but it was probably like 9 or 10 months. And I really believe that like leaving the firm, like let my body relax and like I like had just let go of a lot of stress, and then it happened. The thing that I really took comfort in was that my future child would not know me as the person that I was when I was working a job that was stressing me out, that was forcing myself to do something that I didn't want to do. My child would know me as this person who was like finally following their dreams. And so regardless of what that means from like a financial perspective, there's like some things that you can't put money on, that you can't put a value on.
How long was that transition process when you were kind of where you had sort of made the decision to say like, okay, I'm gonna, go to school for this. Like I'm making the decision to take this leap, but I'm still sort of doing both at one time because I kind of haven't quite made the full jump. Like how long was that process, and was it like a gradual sort of build up, or was it kind of like, okay, I just have to go through this, and then I can finally kind of take that leap?
I love that you're asking that question because I work with people on career transition, and there's people who get like down on themselves that they need to like keep their day job before they're like fully ready to leave and make their like business venture work. So yeah, I love bringing light to like how that actually looks for some people. For me, I went to school in May of 2020. And then I left the firm in October of 2021. So it was like over a year. There was definitely a process. At first, I thought I was going to become a coach, get certified, and then work for another company. This idea, or work for PwC, because they actually do have internal coaches. So that felt like, oh, okay, like I'll have everything I wanted. Stability, like working for a big company, a 401k, and I get to do the work that I want to do. The conundrum was that PwC only hires experienced coaches. I'm like, how am I supposed to get experience if you don't hire me though? So then I had to work through that. I'm like, okay, then what does it look like to own my own business? My dad worked for the city from like teenage years to retirement. The examples in my life are people who like worked for a company and never left. Same with my mom, pretty much. Early on in her career, jumped around like a couple times, but basically stayed with the company for over like 30 or 40 years. Starting a business was like so foreign. I had to really like work on my self-concept, like that I was actually capable of doing that. Maybe the last 6 months leading up to me leaving, I was like, wow, I'm really leaving for no other job, like just to work on my business.
As the agency has grown, the businesses that we work with are bigger. They're generally like further along when they get to us. But in our early days, we saw so many, and we still work with a lot of startups, but we saw so many startups, and all of them had these different origin stories. You had people who did what you did. They had some cash reserves and they had proof of concept. Even if the business is not up and running, they've, signed a client or sold some product, or they've done enough to say like, there's some spark here which I can, build into a flame and grow this thing. And then we've seen other people who have just taken a massive leap of faith with no, planning before it. And I don't think there's a right answer for any person, but I like your version better because it was similar to my version, right? Where we not only like had money saved up, but we also like my wife and I downgraded our lifestyle significantly, and Rich and Ann also, downgraded their lifestyle so that we didn't have as much personal overhead. Got rid of cars, got worse cars, like those sorts of things, because everyone thinks in business you are a risk taker. And there is an element of taking risks, but we're really risk mitigators. That's the entire game, is like finding out how to like mitigate risk at different places so that you're able to run a business without having financial stress that leads to like bad decision making, and things of that nature.
I love the way that you frame that too. It is risk mitigation. And that was a big part of like the coaching that I had to do with myself and with my coach, was like, what is my safety net? What does that look like if I don't make money for the next 6 months? And so I looked at all of those pictures until I was like, okay, like worst case scenario, I might be calling my mom and dad for help or moving in with them or something, A lot of times our brains will jump to these conclusions where we're like all of a sudden like jobless and homeless and like starving. And it's like, well, no, there's like a lot of things that have to happen before you're really in that grave of danger. And so just like kind of like looking at like, what would you actually do if your bank account went to zero? Like, I mean, there's like, you can take out credit and, debt and borrow money from people in your family. I mean, there's so many things you can do. And not to say that that should be the plan, but just to know for yourself, like sometimes like it's comforting to know that there are levers you can pull before you're actually at risk of like something seriously going wrong.
I used to play that game at 4 o'clock in the morning at like times of like intense stress when I'm just like staring at the ceiling. Some of the early days, and once payroll started building, now all of a sudden it was like, hey, we need to generate X dollars in revenue every month, or you have to lay people off, or and that was like the thing that would cause the most stress for me, is the idea of laying someone off, not because they did a poor job, but because I, as the CEO, didn't do a good enough job to make their job sustainable. So I would sit there and I'd like stare at the ceiling, and I would play the game where I would just boil it all back down to zero. And I'm like, okay, if this doesn't happen, then this happens. And if that fails, then this happens. And it always ended with, you'll go get a job.
Yes.
And I was like,
yeah.
that's not that bad.
Yeah, that's not that bad. Yes.
And it would take the pressure off me. Like I remember feeling like the anxiety decrease as I would go through that mental process and be like, you'll just go get a job.
Right. Yes. That's always another option. Yep.
You are pregnant and it's day one and you are no longer employed at PwC and you are now running your business. What did you do?
In the beginning, it wasn't that sexy. It was literally reaching out to people in my network, one-on-one outreach to people and letting them know about the work that I was doing. Depending on the person, if I, could see myself working with them, invited them to a consultation. Other people became kind of like referral partners. I started an Instagram account, which, I still don't use that as often as I as I thought I would. And I read a book called Get Clients Now by CJ Hayden. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one. She basically goes through a menu of like different options of activities you could do to generate business or generate just attention. You like kind of run an experiment for a month. You're like, this week I'm going to do 10 Instagram posts a week and I'm going to reach out to this many people per week. And so it was like kind of like each month trying something new and seeing what stuck.
I have that conversation with our sales team, Emerson, as well, like constantly, where I'm like, output leads to opportunities, opportunities lead to deals. And like, so it just becomes math at that point, right? What I love about what you did is you tapped your network and you started like building your client base with the resources and the bandwidth and the time that you had, at the moment. Even though we're an ad agency, like I can't tell you how many people we talk to where we tell them like advertising is not for you or it's not the right time. And there's other ways to build a business. You can reach out to people. You can put out content on social. You can do whatever you need to do in order to be able to like garner attention. And if you do enough of it and you're consistent with it, and you're good, results will happen like over time. So at this point, Jess, what was your service offering? Because my perception is your business has changed, in the years that you've been doing it. So was it a situation where you're like, look, I have all these different areas where I can help people, and if you're interested, I will sort of like adapt my offering to fit what you need? Or was there a more rigid, like, this is the type of person I want to help and serve, and this is what I offer, and like that's it. You need to fit sort of my, profile.
Yeah, it was more the former at first, for sure. It was more generalized coaching, although I kind of had an inkling of who I wanted to help because the way I described myself when I was working in my corporate job, I saw that pain like all over the place. I saw like a lot of the people I ended up reaching out to were people that I had previously worked with who I knew had similar feelings to me. Like, I'm just doing this because this is what society tells me I should do. And I don't know, like, what else am I, like, can I really make it out there? Is it safe to leave? So I ended up attracting a lot of clients who had those feelings. But I also did a lot of generalized coaching at first.
You were running the business through pregnancy, and then Mars was born. You still have a business to run. You have clients and you have all these things to do. I think I was back to work 3 days after Christopher was born, and I can't imagine running a business and having to carry the load that Sadi was carrying. So as a business owner and now a new mom, like, how did you navigate that period?
Yeah, it was really tricky, to be honest. And it took me longer to kind of figure out how to make it all work than I thought it was. I had like a 3 or 4 month leave, and I always thought of myself as someone who would take a longer leave, but I found that I really wanted to get back to work because I love being a mom, but I also love the work that I was doing. I had some clients who agreed that they signed up with me knowing that I was going to be taking a few months off, or they said, yep, we'll put things on pause for now. We'll pick up when you're back. I was super grateful for that. But getting back on the horse of like outreach, and, I had my mom's help. She was staying with us for a little bit, but she was also working. So it was like we were all like playing like hot potato with the baby, and I was trying to work where I could, and it's a lot. It's like it's breastfeeding, and it's like naps every like 2 hours, 3 hours, and like there's always something new and something sleep. a whole other topic. But what really made the difference for me was finding childcare support that really, like, so getting a nanny and like even just getting okay with that idea. I grew up, my grandmother immigrated from the Philippines when I was born. The modeling that I had was, oh, like someone in the family takes care of the kid, and paying for this kind of support wasn't something that I saw myself doing. I thought it would be my mom, but my mom was still working. So that wasn't really the best option. And it took a little bit of like wrapping my head around the idea that I was going to be spending money paying for support before, like, I wasn't bringing in more income at that point. I was just spending more. And that was hard. I was like, I'm feeling strapped for money and I want to make it. And to do that, I have to spend more. But that is how business is. You invest. You invest and you try to strategize on like which investments are going to have returns. And that one is so pivotal, is like having someone to help you with childcare that you trust so that you can focus on your business efforts. And then I get to be a mom the rest of the time.
Buying back your time, right? Which is, it's a hard lesson to learn because you have to invest in that before you actually get the time back. And then you need to prove to yourself that your time is valuable enough, when you freed it up in order to make that investment.
Completely. And it may not happen in month 1 or 2 or 3. And you might even question, like, what am I doing? But I don't know how, business has been for you, but for me, there's definitely been like months and quarters where I'm like, is this even working? And then other months where I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe I did all of this. It's amazing. And certainly like the kind of period after like returning to work was one of those where I was like, is this even possible? Is this even going to be possible? But it was, and I'm so glad I turned the corner on that. And yeah.
I know you and I have talked about this before, and Emerson, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum. In the early days, I mean, we built our business off the backs of cold calling, because I didn't have an advertising budget. I mean, we had money to sustain our personal lives, but we didn't have money to put into the business. Essentially, what Rich and I put into the business was computers and the rent at a WeWork. That was our like business overhead. And so I would lock myself in one of those booths and I would just like call and call and call and call and call. I knew in the back of my head that I just had to do the tasks without the promise of the results, because if I had to like look for the results, I was going to get demoralized. So I just had to trust that this would work out. And it's hard because you go through a day where you make 250 phone calls and you get a lot of FUs and hang up and like don't call here again and you click, and then one person's like, that's interesting, and I could feel the adrenaline. It's almost like I had withered into this little, and like I was back. I'm like I'm back. I think that's so important because, like you said, in business, you're gonna go through areas in your business and peaks and valleys and times, even for successful businesses, where you feel like I'm just doing, and like nothing's happening. But as long as you're like doing enough of it, I mean, like eventually it will turn.
Yeah, your story always inspires me, and I think I even like reference it with my clients, from time to time. But just like it, the fortitude you had to make those phone calls. I think one time we talked about it, and I was like, "Have you ever like accidentally called the same person like multiple times?" And they're like, "Yep." Like you didn't even have like a system like fully built out at that point, and it just cracks me up because it's like you had like it's like water off a duck's back. Like you just did it. And that's something that I had to really work on, like that fear of rejection, but the best way to work through that is to actually just face it and then learn like, oh, it's not that bad. I've pissed off some people too. And like, it's maybe tough in the moment. And the first time I did it, the first time someone was really turned off from me reaching out to them, I was like sick for like 3 days, just like, just I couldn't do anything. I'm like, wow. Like, but then like after that, I'm like, oh yeah, like that's just part of it. I mean,
I would call it more fear and desperation than fortitude, but but you know what's funny, and Emerson, I'd love to hear your like sales background on how you overcame this as well. But my first ever job that I ever had was I was a telemarketer for my buddy's dad's tree service company. So we would go in after high school and we would make calls in the evening, and it would be like, hey, like we're gonna be in your area. Do you want a free estimate on like, tree gardening and landscaping and all the rest of it? I was so nervous. I must have been like 16 years old. I was so nervous. The first call I picked up, because they had automatic dialers. So you just, when you pick up and someone's there and they're like, hello, and I just hung up because I was so nervous. And 2 weeks later, I was like, what do you mean you don't want to save money on your landscaping? Like, who doesn't want to save money? But how did you deal with that, Emerson? Like in your sales career?
I did outside sales for my first sales job. And we had to wear suits. So I would wear a suit and a tie.
Yeah.
And I would go door to door trying to sort of sell office equipment. And you would see as you were opening the door, the reception desk tense up. Because you could tell. It's like a guy walking in a suit. It's like they're going to try and sell me something. And you would just see the face drop or just the defensiveness go. And you go like, oh, this is... and so you'd learn how to deal with people, although face-to-face in some cases was easier, but that was hard because you'd feel like, oh, I'm putting this work in, I'm going door to door, where the phones became easier.
Yeah.
Because at that point you're like, I can't see the person on the other end and they're not going to kick me out. I mean, I used to get kicked out of buildings. Like security would come and find me and go like, you can't like sell stuff here. And I would go in asymmetrical floor patterns. So I'd go from floor 2 to floor 8 to floor 4 to floor 10 so that they couldn't track me. They didn't know where I was going, like up and down the sort of scale. But then the phone became almost like an easy thing because then you're like, I can just sit here and make 100 calls because I've been rejected so many times in person that like words can't hurt me, as much as someone being upset to see me, that's worse. So it was more just almost like that experience toughened me up for like the phones. And then it was just more... It's kind of that thing once you feel that progress being made and you're going, okay, I'm getting better at this. I'm getting more confident. The rejections become less like I may not make it or I may not be able to do this and more like, another one. There's more to be made. There's more to be sort of had here. But that's just reps and just sort of time and effort, I think.
Reps.
And I think what changes too is, in the early days when you're building a business, you're thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about the customer because you're like, I need to generate revenue, So I'm like, when I'm reaching out for the purpose of like, how do I make money? Like I want someone to pay me for like what I'm offering. As the business grows and you get more successful, you now get choosier with who you want to work with. So now when because we still outbound prospect, it's still a part of our business model. But we truly do it to companies where we think we can add value, So we're not like reaching out to like random people because like we just want business. We turn business away. We're reaching out because we've seen this company and we're impressed by this element of what they're doing, but we feel like there's this area where they're missing, whatever that is, either creatively or podcast, or like we feel like they would be perfect for television and they're not, doing that. So we're reaching out with a purpose because we can add value to them. And we've seen the difference, and how that works. Now, those companies are so much more receptive to talking to us because even the personalized nature of the outreach, they see that we understand their business. We know their model. We're not sending, a bazillion emails to random companies. We're reaching out with the intention of saying, like, we know you and we think this can work for you. Have you seen that as your business has grown? Like now when you sort of get in touch with people, it's less, well, one, like, did you feel like that was the same for you from like early days to now? Whereas now when you're like reaching out to people, it's like, what you can do. You've proven it. You can help. And it gives you more confidence in that sales process because you're not just sort of like grasping for things.
Absolutely. It's a lot easier to come from a place of like, I feel right with myself because I know that I'm offering to provide value. But it is a lot harder when you're kind of in a desperate place because you can't help but think about what you need to gain from it or to just sustain your life, So there's a lot of like mental work that I do. Like if I am in like that sort of a desperate place, I really think about like, I'm not just doing this for money. Like if all I really wanted was money, I would have stayed at PwC. I I really want to do work that makes a difference in people's lives. Um, and so I get really grounded in like why what I'm giving, what I'm offering is worth way more than the money that I'm charging for it. And then from that place, like once I really feel good about that and I write like things down, like I make a list of like 10 reasons why that's true. And then I reach out to people. Um, and yes, of course, like having had success, I have people who, they work with me and then they refer people to me. Like that's like one of the biggest compliments. But like clearly, like you get all these like these affirmations that what you're doing is working. And then it kind of, and I think the reps thing too is like really, really key. Like just, and I love that you did that comparison too between like going in person. Like that's way higher stakes than like the phone call. I like that. I might try doing that just so that I could feel like getting on the phone is is easier.
I don't know if I recommend it, but one thing that you said that was interesting, and I think earlier, and then you just kind of reiterated it, is becoming a mom helped your business because of this thing that it opened up in terms of another kind of avenue of service you could offer, or sort of coaching you could offer for new mothers, and sort of that realization.
Yeah.
What was that process for you in terms of like going, you know what, I can put this together as something I can sort of offer, and then starting to develop that with, new clients and new people that you're sort of coaching? Was it sort of, hey, I have a network of people that I know are moms in this sort of situation? Was it sort of like, oh, I know, clients that may have referrals from me? Is it something that you're building out in terms of almost like, hey, this is almost structured in a way that I'm sort of building a curriculum, so to speak, for these new moms to sort of help?
I mean, for me, it was like a lot of my work is like I go through a personal journey and then I'm like, oh, that was super hard and now I know how to do it. So let me teach someone else how. And so like that happened with my career. I help people with career transition. I transitioned and now I'm like, hey, like if I can do it, you can do it. Let me just tell, like, there's no feeling that you're going to go through in this process that I haven't been through myself. So one, I can empathize, and two, I can be proof to you that it's possible to really make it to the other side. With motherhood, it was really my personal experience with postpartum anxiety. I felt like so anxious all the time about doing the right thing. And like, at first it manifested in like, I didn't even want to leave my house for like months. And every time I did, it was like a very forced process. I was scared. And like, I was like, what if I don't have my resources? What if the baby's crying so much? Like, is she like having a terrible time in the car seat? Like every like intrusive, scary thought, like, what if we get in a car accident? Blah, blah. Just so many like just scary like fear monsters in my head about what could happen. And I felt so strange because I'm like, there's all these other moms who like seem to be like enjoying life and they're just like out, like it's nothing. But as I started sharing how I was feeling, as I was part of support groups, there's quite a few in Santa Barbara, which I'm really fortunate for. Whenever I would share really vulnerably about like what I'm actually going through, I'd be in a room with like 40 other women and they'd be like, me too. Like, that's how I feel. Like it took everything in me to get here. And so I realized, I was like, a lot of people are masking this. They're feeling this, but not necessarily talking about it. And I figured out, the support I needed between like therapy, coaching, like exposure therapy, just like doing the things that I'm scared to do. And like coming up with like systems like, okay, like I'll let myself research this one like ailment thing on like what like my daughter's like rash on Google for like 5 to 10 minutes. Beyond that, it's just like making me more anxious than it's helping, So I just came up with like strategies for myself and things that worked. And then I just like started sharing that with people, like just naturally, not like with any expectation that they work with me, but just in community. Before long, there were people who were like, I'm interested in working with you. It seems like you could really help me with this. And those yeah, those have been some of like my most rewarding clients and work, is just seeing moms like turn that corner and they're like, anxiety starts to like float away. They get a better handle on it and they just start to feel more like empowered as a mom and less like burdened by like, yeah, the mental ailments that can come with it.
Just so as the business has grown, um, how have you defined your sort of like target, you know, person, your target customer, your target client, like obviously like when we were early on at Stark, our target client was whoever would hire us for whatever they wanted to hire us for. And as the years have gone on, like that's changed, right? And like we call them ICPs, like ideal customer profiles. But who is your like target person or persons that you're speaking to?
Yeah, I do find that tricky even now, like this many years in, because I say I primarily work with women, but I've also worked with, a handful of men too. I think the thing that I really look for is like, do we vibe? Are you able to be vulnerable with me? Do you trust me? Do I feel that in conversation? I don't know if I have like an exact ideal. I do work with people who are in career transition. I do work with new moms, but there's a lot more to it than that when the type of work I do is so intimate. It's really about like, do we connect? Is there a deeper connection there? And I suss that out a lot on consults. When it comes to like, let's say marketing, like, okay, well, because I know that a lot of times you want to identify who your ideal client is to be able to market, right? Um, this, I haven't even told Sadi this, but sometimes like when I write, I just write to people who like I try to bring to mind a person who I know has my back and loves me and loves the work that I do. So a lot of times I just write as if I'm writing to Sadi.
Wow.
She's my person.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's making me cry. And I got that idea from a mentor of mine. Her name's Simone Soul, and she's like a marketing guide. She's going through a transition right now, so she doesn't want to be called that anymore. But anyway, she has a best friend too, and that's who she would picture. She wrote emails every single week, and she would just imagine that she was writing to her best friend. And so I took that idea from her, and that's what I do.
I love that. I mean, I think that's a good. I wanted to talk about your email newsletter that you started
Yeah.
recently because I read them,
Yeah.
and they're really good,
Yeah.
and they're very personal and they're very vulnerable,
Yep.
So, what led you to want to start doing that, and
Yeah.
what was sort of the purpose behind it, and how have you assessed the reaction to that for the people that it's going to?
Absolutely. Yeah, because that's really been pivotal for me. Like I feel like I wish I started that sooner. Um, I wanted Instagram to be the right fit for me, and I'm not giving that up. I think that there's definitely like benefits that Instagram provides that I couldn't get through just my letters. But I essentially found that like it's hard for me to go on social media. Like there's something like I've had a block with it for the past like since I started my business. And sometimes I'm able to overcome that block, but it feels limiting to me. I don't particularly like doing reels or trendy things. Like I'm not that person that's going to do like a trendy dance to get like followers. And I actually am not putting down people who do that. It just doesn't feel like me.
Yep.
That's
It
not
doesn't
who
feel
I,
authentic
it
to
doesn't feel
yourself.
authentic
Yeah.
to me. Like I'm the person who's like I love enjoying like entertaining things, but I'm the person like, let's like talk about what's on your heart. Like I'm that person. I'm like less silly and more like, let's talk about what's real. And so, and it just felt limiting to be able to like say what I want to say in the confines of like what Instagram would allow me to post and like, 10 squares or 20 squares or whatever it is now. I'm just more verbose than that. And so I decided to start writing letters because I could tell like a full story. And also, I don't get to see how many people liked or read it. I don't look at those numbers and I don't have to think about that. I do get to see how many people unsubscribe. So there's that, but it's been far more like positive reaction to the letters than there's been rejection. And Yeah, it's been really nice. Like I feel like I'm really connecting with people. People are writing back to me. They're like, sometimes I'll leave a journal prompt and it's like optional if you want to write to me. And people are writing to me. They're like, I really connected with this, or and it's like it's bringing me to mind for people. There's like opportunities that are coming my way just because I'm in people's inbox like every week. And yeah.
What I love about the way you're running the newsletter, and I don't know if this is just happening authentically or you've thought about this, in
Hmm.
advance, is it's one to one, even though it's one to many, right? And
Hmm.
what I mean by that, and now it makes sense because you're like, you actually have a person in mind, whether it's Sadi or,
Hmm.
someone else that you're
Hmm.
writing to, but it feels very personal. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of brands make this mistake when it comes to email marketing specifically,
Hmm.
where they write to like these massive groups and it feels markety and it feels like
Hmm.
nothing, and you unsubscribe and you're not interested. Whereas when I read your email newsletter, it
Yeah.
feels very personal,
I'm
and
so
it
glad to
feels
hear.
very direct, which makes it more engaging.
Oh,
Like
I'm
you
so
know, you
glad.
want to like sort of pay attention, which I think is a good tip and takeaway for even
Yeah.
people who are not in like the coaching space or like a area of business that is so personal. But like the more personal you can make these things,
Hmm.
and it's not like you're spending a whole lot of time designing the emails with like
Yeah.
fancy banners, and
Nope.
it's a letter.
It's a letter.
It's a
That's
letter, and it's
Yep.
like, this is a story, and like boom, and
Yep.
like I'm sending it out to you.
Hmm. That's right.
So
Yes.
how do you have a strategy to get more people on this email list, or how are you doing it now? Is it sort of happening naturally? Because it's a really good, thing that you're running. So it's
Yeah.
like I imagine the more people that get onto that like subscriber list,
Uh-huh.
like the more value they're going to get out of it, and then
Mhm.
reciprocally, there's effect on your business as well.
Yes. Like so far it's been personal invitation to the list. Like just if people are interested in my on Instagram content, I invite them. I'm like, hey, by the way, I have a newsletter. There is a way to subscribe on my website, like a window will pop up. But the other main way is I also do run my own workshops. And so when you sign up to be to participate in one of the workshops that I throw, then one of the things is you get automatically subscribed to my letter.
Jess, can you share some of the more fulfilling outcomes that you've, either achieved personally or your clients have achieved as you've worked with, these, various people over the years? For us, like we were, Emerson, Rich, and I were chit-chatting about this the other day. It's like, because we've got so many different clients now, and some bigger and some smaller, but we get so pumped by the wins.
Yeah.
Like we get so pumped. It may be a startup brand who like literally they sold their first product and we're like jacked about it,
Oh.
and it's like,
Yeah.
like one thing has sold and we're like, okay, let's go, and
Yes.
like I feel like that motivates us, and like keeps us, like getting after it. But like, what are some of the things you've had with the people that you've worked with that have been the most fulfilling for you in this journey?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, off the top of my head, like one client who she's been in her career for more than um I'd say it's 15 years now. And she was just getting to the point of burnout. But sometimes when you're at that like higher level VP director level, it can seem more and more impossible to take time off, even when it's so needed for your health. And last year, we helped her negotiate a 6-month sabbatical, which was just huge for her to just have this like time fully paid. She got to spend time with her family and just focus on herself and like go to Coachella or like whatever, she just really had the time of her life. And another is like a client that I was just speaking to this week who she's a tax accountant and she's working for a big firm and she was like burning the midnight oil like so much. I mean, it pained me. Like sometimes like the only break in her week was really just talking to me and otherwise she was like behind her laptop like morning till night and on the weekends. And we just helped her find she didn't even leave tax accounting. She just now works for another tax firm where they honor the boundaries that she wants to have. And she was just like on the phone with me this week, like just almost in tears, just like she's like, I can't believe this firm like treats me this well, and she's like now dating somebody new, and she's like, it's weird. Like, she's like, I like my life now. And it's really, yeah, so gratifying to see that. And then even more recently with some of the moms who I've been working with, who are finding more enjoyment in motherhood, because it's so hard, and you can feel so, like, you can feel so lonely, and like your efforts are invisible. And when you're not enjoying it, it's like you start to feel guilt about that too. And so when I help moms like turn the corner on that, and they start to really just like live more in the moment, and they're finding the support they need. They gave themselves the permission they finally needed to hire more support, or get like a cleaning person to come to their house, or like eat food out more often so they're not so stretched thin with their time or whatever. And they just start finding more freedom like that. That's really like empowering and inspiring to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you knew when you started your business what you know now, what would you have done differently?
I think I would have stalled less. When I was telling you the story of my career, like there were these like specific moments where my intuition was telling me, like, go down a different path. This isn't the path for you. And of course, like, my life turned out, I love where it's at right now, but like there was a lot of pain that I could have avoided. I was a lot more capable than I gave myself credit for early on. If I could go back in time, I would have done it sooner. I would have just like said, F it. And, if my parents aren't happy with me doing this at 24 years old, like, let's just try it. And, life is long. If I need to recover, I will. And then also just like kind of like fear is part of the process. Like just knowing that, just like the reward that I want is on the other side of like feeling the fear, but doing it anyway. Yeah.
And if someone was starting a coaching business today,
Mm-hmm.
Someone was going to leave PwC,
Yeah.
and they're starting a coaching business today, what advice would you give them?
Well, one, like to tap into their network. Yeah, that's what I did, but it really like paid dividends early on, to just like, there are so many people when you work in a job like that, you meet so many people, and it's just built in because you're at the office or you're on these big engagements. And so you're meeting people constantly. That's something that like doesn't happen as organically once you like work for yourself and you either work at a WeWork or in your home office. You're around so many people. So keep those relationships warm. Like reach out to those people and tell them like what you're doing. And also like this, I had talked about like getting right with yourself and like knowing like what the value is of what you offer. Like when you approach people, come to it from a place of like knowing that what you want to provide is of value to them. I feel like that takes like, it can be felt. Like there's things that your sixth sense can just like understand when you're talking to somebody, if like they're thinking about themselves or if they're thinking about you.
It's so true in like so many aspects of a business, right? Like we chat about this all the time, Emerson. Like, on the sales end, what we always tell our sales team is you're not a sales team, right? Like the sales aspect is actually like getting on the phone with a person,
Yeah.
or getting into a meeting with a person. That's sales.
Yeah.
But once you actually get in, you're a consultant.
Uh-huh.
Like
Yes.
now you're consulting. You're like,
Yes.
you're not selling anything,
Yep.
because you're trying to assess whether we can help, and they're trying to assess whether we're the right person to solve their problems.
Yes.
And both of those need to align.
Yes.
And otherwise it just doesn't make sense. And then when you transition into, the actual like work of like marketing and advertising for us, it's exactly the same thing. It's like we're always looking to add value, because now we're working together. And if we can't add value, if we're not like leading with what's best for you and your business, and sometimes that's pushing back, sometimes that's disagreeing with the customer
Yes.
or the client and telling them why. But what we found is like when you commit to doing that, instead of just saying yes to everything a person wants, when you commit to actually saying like, respectfully, I disagree and here's why.
Yes.
That person, they may disagree with you, but they now trust you.
Uh-huh.
And more importantly, now you have a real relationship.
Yes.
You have like a real partnership. And like those are the clients that we've seen the most success with, because they just know like sometimes we'll be right, sometimes we'll be wrong. But more important than that, we're in the trenches with them,
Yeah.
like the entire way.
Boiled down, it's like being honest. I think that is the essential advice, is like, this won't feel slimy if you're honest. It's when we're dishonest that it starts to feel really like, where you feel like out of sorts and like this is wrong. So yeah, I agree with that. Like, disagree if you disagree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
I have one final question for
Yeah.
you, which is what is a book you have read recently that you would recommend to people?
Regenerative Business by Sam Garcia. She is she's also a marketing mentor of mine, and she has a really interesting life. She actually lives on Hawaii off grid with her husband, who's a regenerative farmer. And like one of their missions is like restoring some of the land in Hawaii that has been like depleted for whatever commercial reasons, and like they buy up the property and then they put like native plants and do regenerative farming, and then like they give back some of this land to like the indigenous people there. Anyway, they have this like bigger mission that's super inspiring, number one. But she takes what she knows from a regenerative farming perspective and translates it to business. So her whole book is about how to build a business that's not only sustainable, but that's regenerative and like good for you, good for your clients, and better for the planet. It was just so inspiring. Like her first chapter is on like dirt. And like I never thought about dirt before. And she's like, dirt like literally is seen as like scum, like like ill. And like we need dirt is soil. Soil makes food. Like we can't exist without it. And the way she just talks about it is so beautiful and inspiring. It just made me really rethink a lot of the things I've thought about one, the world, but also business. So by far, like that book is like one that I keep going back to and referencing, and it's just really refreshing.
It seems like mission is like a core like trend that goes through like a lot of areas of your life. Just like hearing you speak, like from early days of you're about to start this like really good job right out of college, and most kids are like, I'm getting paid and making money, and like they're pumped about it. You had this like, this is not right for my life at that coaching seminar. Like again, it's like, and in your book recommendation, even the way you articulate why the book is important seems to have this like mission, like sort of driven, thing. And, so I don't even have a question there. I was just more like, is that, do you see that?
I appreciate that reflection, because I didn't even think about it. And you asked me earlier about like the evolution of like my business and like my like focus areas and expertise. And like at one point I was a purpose coach. And yeah, absolutely. Like I think a lot of what I do boils down to like helping people identify like what they feel they were destined on this earth to do, and helping them to do that instead of the things that everyone else is telling them to do, or the things that they feel pressured to do. Like if you could really live the way that you wanted to, if you could really contribute to the world in the way that you wanted to, what would it be? And those are the journeys that are so inspiring for me. That's why your journey is so inspiring for me too. I mean, you knew that you wanted to lead a company. And even though like it wasn't like this like huge pivot, like you kind of knew what your focus was, it was still a huge deal. I remember those times with you and Sadi, and like sleepless nights, and like, I remember how like stressful it was, and it was bold and it was brave, and like those stories like make me feel alive and inspired. So of course I want to work with people on them, because it's so fun to see them make them come to fruition. Yeah.
Just, I'll tell you, when Sadi told me you were starting, on your own, like I told Sadi, I was like, she's gonna crush, like she'll crush it, because certain people just, have the intellect, but then they have the drive, and they just have the intangibles, and like, it's just like you just get a sense of, like and I know Emerson would agree with this. Like we meet certain people, when the moment they walk in the door, we're like, this person's gonna, you can just sort of tell. And it's been fun to watch your business grow It's probably not been as fun to like grow it, but from the
It has its
outside,
moments.
There's some fun there.
yeah. But we thank
Yeah.
you so much for sharing
Yeah.
so much like personal details about how you've grown it in your journey and your road, and yeah, we appreciate you.
Absolutely. Adam, Emerson, thank you for having me. Thank you, Stark. And
Yeah.
this was so fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.